Hey everyone! For our first project in this course, we'll be learning some foundational aspects of the editing process. We'll be learning about structure and organization both at the file level and within the Premiere interface itself. And then we'll dive into building a project from scratch and how to navigate the basic application interface. And then also, how to get your creative assets into Premiere so you can begin working with them. Then we'll continue the editing process by using a couple different methods to get your first sequence of clips into the timeline. And there will, of course, be plenty of helpful keyboard shortcuts to help you get faster along the way. Once we've got our sequence built, we'll be looking at audio mixing so we can maximize the impact of the music, the natural sound, and whatever sound effects we may use. And finally, we'll learn how to output our videos for review and distribution. So we're going to be learning about this entire foundational process as we move through our first project, the montage. So let's jump into the virtual lecture and begin learning about just what a montage is.
So what is montage? Well, simply defined, it's a series of shots edited in sequence, one clip after another, and it often has the purpose of condensing space and time, taking things that happen in different locations and over the course of time and collapsing them into a very small amount of time on screen. And this is done with the goal of communicating information and, very importantly, emotion. It's incredible how much information can be conveyed in such a short period of time simply by putting shots that are related or even unrelated together to visually get that story across, often without dialogue, without any text, simply by using the imagery. And that imagery can be very powerful in evoking an emotional response from the viewer. Now, this style of editing, montage, was actually pioneered by Soviet filmmakers in the 1920s. There were many of them that were exploring what could be done with different types of cinematography and with different types of editing. And chief amongst them was this guy you see here, Sergei Eisenstein. These are a few of his more well-known films: 10 Days That Shook the World, Strike, and probably the film he is known best for, Battleship Potemkin. Now, one of the things that these filmmakers wanted to do was to communicate to a vast population in Russia that had just been through the Russian Revolution. And most of them were illiterate. They could not read or write. But political information could be effectively communicated via the art of montage, visual communication. They could show people what they wanted to say, communicated through moving images. And it proved to be incredibly effective. So Sergei was a film theorist. He had a lot of ideas about how film could be utilized and developed into a form of high art, which, of course, is exactly what happened all over the world. And one of the things he was chiefly interested in was the collision and the juxtaposition of images to produce meaning. So a shot could have its own identity, and the shot that followed it could have its own identity. But you put those two shots together, whether they are related or not, and you can generate a third meaning that is not contained in either of the parts. That's montage. And as I said before, it proved to be a very powerful psychological tool. And it is still used today all over the place. Quite often in opening sequences as a way to lay the foundation for a film, set the scene, prep the audience, and put them in the proper mindset for what's going to happen. It's also used as a transitional element from one location to another, one time to another, one scene to another, as well as for communicating information in a condensed fashion about the plot or characters in the film. So one of Sergei's most important achievements was his development of the methods of montage. And we're going to take a look at several of them right now. First of all, we've got metric. This is where edits are made at a regular time value. It could be a certain number of frames, a certain number of seconds, or even longer values. But the important thing is that the cuts occur at a regular time value, regardless of what's happening on screen. There's just going to be a cut no matter what. Now, when you look at the video examples below, You'll see I have one for metric, and there's actually a second counter in the lower right corner, just to help you understand the regular interval at which the cuts occur. And it's interesting, at the beginning of the video, it seems to be rhythmically tied to the music, but then it actually strays away from that because the music is actually slightly faster than the cut rate, and then eventually it comes back around. Among other things, metric montage is very often used to make an audience uncomfortable. It carries along with it this sort of sense of impendingness, like something's going to happen no matter what, and it can be quite effective to that end. The next method is rhythmic, and this is often based on audio or visual cues, the most common of which being the beat in music, cutting on the beat. The vast majority of music videos are done this way. In addition to commercials, branding work, it's very often rhythmically tied, but it doesn't have to rely on music alone. It can actually be tied to visual cues, things that are actually happening on screen. An example would be a ball bouncing, with a cut based on when that ball contacts the ground. Someone walking, cutting on their footsteps, someone doing dance moves, and cutting when they're in a particularly interesting visual position. The next method is tonal, and that's primarily concerned with conveying feeling and emotion. So it's not really tied to time or audio or visual cues. It's more about the nature of the content itself and how a group of shots interact together to generate a feeling and elicit an emotional response in the viewer. And you'll see in several examples I have below how powerful this can be. And finally, we have overtonal montage, which combines two or more of the other methods to produce a varied and often more powerful effect on the audience. And the example I have below is from the Brian De Palma film, The Untouchables. And this scene that takes place entirely in slow motion utilizes metric, rhythmic, and tonal montage, separately at different points during the scene and sometimes even simultaneously. Check it out and see if you can pick out where that happens. So that about does it for montage, my friends. Be sure to check out the videos below before moving on to the montage quiz.